Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today, well, it's pretty ambitious. We are really trying to cut straight into the core architecture of modern power.
Yeah, we've got quite a stack of sources here. Everything from, global AI competition estimates, historical economic analysis.
Right down to some really intense corporate biographies, people building these massive companies.
Exactly. It's a lot, but we're looking for the connections, the unifying mechanics underneath it all.
So the goal is to kind of synthesize all these different threads, this sea of information.
That's the plan, to really get a handle on the key dynamics shaping things today. How is technology, like AI, reshaping global leadership? Why does wealth concentrate like it does?
And what about the role of these super intense founders and their corporate cultures?
Precisely. It all seems connected.
We're talking about huge figures, incredible amounts of money, and shifts that are basically rewriting the rules. So let's establish maybe three core themes. First, how AI is changing the game for global economic leadership. Second, how these unique, sometimes, frankly, ruthless corporate cultures drive success and sometimes failure.
Right. The good and the bad.
And finally, let's look at the enduring ways wealth gets concentrated, no matter the time period. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we start? Maybe with the future, with AI.
Makes sense. When we talk about AI, we really need to shift our thinking. It's not just small improvements anymore. We're talking exponential disruption. The financial scale alone is, well, it's almost hard to wrap your head around.
I'm looking at this PricewaterhouseCoopers estimate. It is genuinely staggering. They're saying AI deployment will add, $15.7 trillion to global GDP by 2030?
15.7 trillion.
That's not just a big number. I mean, that's like adding the entire current economies of China and India combined.
Yeah.
In less than 7 years.
And here's where it gets really interesting, geopolitically speaking. That $15.7 trillion, it's not going to be evenly distributed. Not at all.
Right. The forecast predicts a huge imbalance. China is expected to capture $7 trillion of that, while North America gets $3.7 trillion.
Almost double. That's not just an economic lead. Think about the political influence, the soft power that comes with that kind of economic dominance. It tilts the global balance.
So the obvious question is, why? Why is China set to grab such a huge slice of this AI pie? We hear a lot about research processing power.
And those matter, of course. But the source suggests the real edge, at least in the near term, is in implementation. Specifically, something called perception AI.
Perception AI. Okay, what exactly is that?
Think of it as the next step. It's where AI moves out of the digital realm, out of the cloud, and into the physical world around us.
So embedding AI into everything. Objects, environments.
Exactly. Integrating sensors, predictive intelligence into city infrastructure, medical devices, appliances, you name it. Blurring the lines between digital and physical.
Okay, that sounds like it would require a massive industrial capacity and also people being okay with all that data collection.
Bingo. Two huge advantages for China right there. First, you've got Shenzhen. The speed and sophistication of their hardware manufacturing is just unparalleled. Need AI in millions of devices quickly. They can do it.
And the second factor?
It's the cultural aspect, according to these sources, a relative cultural nonchalance about data privacy among users in China.
Wow, that's a massive competitive edge, isn't it? It just cuts down so much of the friction we see here.
Absolutely. In the West, every smart fridge or traffic light comes with huge debates, regulations, consumer pushback on privacy. In China, the path from lab to large-scale deployment is just smoother, faster.
Which means they get the data faster, the AI learns faster. It's a feedback loop.
Exactly. It becomes self-reinforcing. So today, maybe the edge seems small, like 60-40 in China's favor, but the projection is that within 5 years, those factors give China an 80% chance, an 80-20 edge over the U.S. in implementing perception AI.
80-20, that's decisive. So the race isn't just about who invents the next algorithm.
It's increasingly about who can deploy it fastest and widest.
Yeah.
Velocity is key.
And looking back, the U.S. government's preparation, well, it seems a bit out of sync with that scale. The 2016 Obama White House plan, it was called a common sense prescription.
Right, and that's the mismatch. It focused on good things, sensible things, more research funds, civilian-military cooperation, trying to mitigate social disruption, but it was a measured, linear plan for an exponential reality.
A common sense approach to something that's fundamentally disruptive.
Exactly. $15.7 trillion in disruption demands more than just mitigation. It probably demands a fundamental rethink of the economy itself.
And speaking of disruption, the biggest one, the one we really have to grapple with, is jobs. labor. The sources are pretty blunt about this. Productivity gains mean job losses. Big ones.
And crucially, this isn't just about factory workers or truck drivers anymore. That's the old narrative.
Right. The idea that a good degree protects you, that might be fading.
It really might be. Highly educated white-collar workers are just as exposed. Think about paralegals scanning documents, radiologists reading x-rays, financial analysts spotting market trends.
Tasks based on pattern recognition?
Exactly. And pattern recognition is something machines are getting incredibly good at, often better than humans. So that specialized professional degree, not the ironclad job security it once was.
So if AI starts displacing workers across the board, blue collar, white collar, the whole economic model starts to wobble, right? We can't all just manage the AIs. What's left for people to do? What does that economy look like?
This gets right to the heart of how capital works, especially venture capital. VCs chase exponential returns. They want businesses that can scale infinitely with almost no extra cost per user.
Digital replication, software,
Done.
platforms.
That's the engine of the AI boom. But what about work that can't be digitally replicated? Human care, teaching, craft, therapy?
Things that require direct human interaction, physical presence.
Precisely. If you look at impact investing in those areas like elder care, the returns are generally linear. You build in one nurse, one facility, one patient at a time. You get just copy-paste it globally overnight.
And VCs aren't typically interested in linear returns. They need that hockey stick growth curve.
Which means they are structurally, fundamentally de-incentivized from backing businesses where human labor is the essential element, the bottleneck even. And that creates this massive societal tension. The market rewards replacing humans, even when the human touch is the whole point.
Okay, so the tech is exponential, the economic incentives favor automation, but who's driving these incredibly fast-moving, often disruptive companies? It's usually not a committee.
No, it's almost always centered on the founder. Their personality, their drive, it sets the entire tone, the entire culture. It becomes this intense gravitational force. Look at Elon Musk.
Yeah, his style is legendary. It's described as hardcore, all in. Didn't he literally move into the factory sometime?
He did. Sleeping on factory floor, living in the hangar at Cape Canaveral during crunch times, total immersion. And that personal sacrifice sets the expectation for everyone else.
Even asking people to work on holidays, like Thanksgiving.
Yes, the sources mention that. His rationale was basically, any day the factory isn't making batteries delays Tesla's output. But it goes deeper. He's argued that being too nice, meaning hesitant to fire underperformers, actually harms the high performers.
Because it drags down the whole team.
That's the argument. It's an intensity framed as a kind of moral imperative, focused purely on the collective goal, on radical efficiency.
You can see echoes of that kind of drive way back, can't you? Like with Bill Gates and early Microsoft.
Absolutely. Microsoft in the late 70s was basically Bill Gates personified. Intense, incredibly driven, smart, and utterly determined to win.
They were good at anticipating the market, weren't they? Not just coding.
Very good.
Yeah.
Developing Fortran for the 8080 chip, pushing IBM towards the 60-bit Intel chip for the PC. These were strategic bets on where the hardware was going, ensuring their software would dominate.
But that competitiveness had a sharp edge. It could become predatory.
It definitely could. The sources mention Gates' absolute determination to take digital research out of the market. That wasn't just competition. It was aiming for annihilation of their main rival in operating systems. Microsoft was built to win, not just to participate.
But when that kind of intense, singular focus goes off the rails ethically, the results can be catastrophic. Theranos is maybe the prime example recently, Elizabeth Holmes.
Holmes took that fake it till you make it mantra to a criminal level. The story about her going after her former neighbor, Richard Fewes, over a patent. It shows that steamroller mentality.
Yeah.
He filed a patent, maybe relevant, maybe not, and her reaction was immediate legal attack.
Viewing it as blackmail instead of a potential business issue.
Right. But the real tell, the quiet admission of total failure, was massive in scope.
What was that?
Where at first, when things got really hot, the sources say she effectively sacrificed her boyfriend, Sunny Balwani, framing his departure as a retirement to deflect blame.
But the bigger thing.
The bigger thing was Theranos voiding tens of thousands of blood test results, including 2 years of results from their Edison devices.
Voiding the results.
Yeah, essentially saying, we can't stand by these tests. It was a massive, if indirect, admission that their core technology didn't work reliably. And that, of course, led Walgreens to pull the plug on their partnership immediately. Devastating.
You see a different kind of credibility breakdown, more financially driven with WeWork and Adam Newman, The whole community branding versus the reality.
Newman pulled off what one source calls a magic trick. He got really smart, sophisticated investors, Harvard's endowment, Fidelity, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, to buy into the idea that his office subleasing company was some kind of revolutionary tech firm worth billions and billions.
How did that happen? How did they ignore the basic business model?
It seems to have been a combination of Newman's incredibly charismatic, almost messianic selling of the vision, plus a really opaque corporate structure. The wheels started coming off when his own self-dealing became too obvious to ignore.
Like buying buildings himself and leasing them back to WeWork.
Exactly. Stuff
Uh-huh.
like that. It just completely shredded the community and sharing narrative when the founder was so clearly enriching himself through these conflicts of interest. The valuation just couldn't hold up under that scrutiny.
And then there's Sam Bankman-Fried at FTX and Alameda. Just the scale of the missing money combined with this weird lack of focus.
Yeah, the sources paint a picture of shocking contrast. Billions of dollars from Alameda being risked, essentially gambled, while Bankman-Fried himself seemed distracted. Someone apparently wanted to ask him, why the heck did you spend the last year playing storybook brawl during the crisis?
Playing a video game while the empire crumbled.
It suggests a profound detachment from the risks he was creating. And the internal setup was just asking for trouble.
How so? The incentives were misaligned.
Massively. You had key people like Caroline Ellison and Nishad Singh, who owned valuable shares in FTX, the exchange. But they were running or working for Alameda, the trading firm that was taking huge risks with FTX customer funds.
So their personal wealth was tied to FTX's success, yet their job involved potentially blowing it up.
Exactly. A huge conflict of interest. But the sources note that none of them apparently voiced any real disapproval of the massive risks being taken. It points to this strange loyalty, maybe a cult-like atmosphere, and a total failure of basic risk management and governance.
So we've seen how tech and intense founders drive modern power. But these feel like new ways to exploit something much older, much more fundamental, the way wealth itself tends to concentrate. Let's shift to that underlying structure.
Okay? And for that, you really have to start with Thomas Piketty and the central idea, the engine of inequality. 1G dollar.
R is greater than G.
Yeah.
Simple formula, profound consequences.
Extremely. It just means that if the rate of return on capital, that's profit from investments, stocks, bonds, real estate, whatever, is consistently higher than the rate of economic growth, DGTI, which reflects growth in wages and over output, then wealth inequality will inevitably increase.
So if investments grow faster than the economy and wages, the rich get richer faster than everyone else.
That's the core mechanism. Piketty uses an example. If the economy grows at 1% a year, but capital barrel returns 5% a year,
Which seems plausible historically.
right, then a wealthy person only needs to reinvest 1/5 of their investment income each year to ensure their fortune goes faster than average income. They can spend the other 4/5, live incredibly well, and still pull further away from everyone else.
It's like a built-in advantage, a structural force pulling wealth upwards.
Exactly. Piketty argues that while wealth concentration might be a bit lower now than its absolute peak around 1900, 1910, it remains extremely high. It's this long-term, self-perpetuating dynamic baked into capitalism.
And this theory isn't just abstract math. It plays out in real families, real dynasties. The Rockefellers are a classic example of managing that concentration across generations.
Yeah, try is the rule, but the Rockefellers show the practice, how you actually handle passing down that immense wealth and the power that comes with it.
There was that disparity in inheritance, right? John D. Rockefeller Jr. got way more than his sisters.
He did. Alta and Edith got trusts worth $12 million each, a fortune, obviously, but much less than Junior. And Rockefeller Sr. had a specific justification for this.
What was it?
It boiled down to stewardship. He believed Junior was the one who would carry on his philanthropic and charitable work in the same spirit. The money given to Junior wasn't just for personal use. It came with the expectation, the duty, to manage the family's legacy and philanthropy. It was a job.
Inheriting a responsibility, not just cash. And there's that amazing irony in how the Rockefeller legacy actually survived the government trying to break it up.
Oh, it's incredible. The big antitrust case against Standard Oil meant to shatter its monopoly.
Actually ended up protecting the family's wealth in the long run.
Precisely. By breaking Standard Oil into 34 separate companies, which became giants like Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, it diversified the family's holdings enormously. Instead of having all their eggs in one giant vulnerable basket, they now had stakes across the booming 20th century oil industry. The breakup ironically guaranteed their financial dominance for generations.
Talk about unintended consequences. Wealth finds a way. Now, moving beyond the West, the sources draw a really interesting contrast with what they call the Asian Godfathers, a different model of wealth concentration.
Yeah, this is important because it highlights wealth accumulating without necessarily driving cutting-edge global innovation in the same way. These tycoons, particularly in Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, Thailand, Indonesia, often built their fortunes differently.
How so?
Less about inventing new tech, more about securing advantages in existing markets, protected markets, cartels, getting non-competitive government contracts for huge infrastructure projects, deals, connections.
And this led to a specific kind of economy, something called technology-less industrialization.
Exactly. You'd see impressive factories, gleaming skyscrapers, all the outward signs of modernity.
Yeah.
But the actual technology, the complex project management, often imported. The tycoons were masters of the deal, navigating complex regulations and relationships, but perhaps neglected investing in homegrown R&D.
So, wealth without deep innovation, creating a potential long-term vulnerability.
That's the risk. Relying on external tech, lacking a truly competitive industrial base, despite the huge personal fortunes at the top. And their access to capital wasn't just about brilliant ideas either.
Connections played a big role. Banks.
A huge role. The relationships between the big families and major regional banks like Hong Kong Bank or Bangkok Bank were critical. One source calls it the underlying plot. That access to finance, often based on relationships as much as spreadsheets, was key to funding their empires.
And like many powerful figures, they cultivated a certain origin story, the rags to riches narrative.
Oh, yes. That narrative is powerful. But digging into it, especially, say, in Thailand, research found only about 20% were genuinely self-made from scratch. Many came from already privileged groups within Bangkok Chinese society, often with better education than the myth suggests.
Polishing the story to emphasize sheer will over initial advantages.
It makes the success seem more attainable, less dependent on circumstance or connections.
Yep.
It's part of maintaining that powerful image.
Okay, so wealth concentrates structurally and through specific tactics like dynasty management or controlling protected markets. But it's also accumulated and defended through some pretty aggressive financial maneuvers, sometimes skating very close to the legal line or crossing it. Let's get into that financial underworld, starting with the 80s.
Yeah, the leveraged buyout, the LBO craze of the 1980s. The battle for RJR Nabisco is the iconic example. Pure financial warfare. The atmosphere was electric, incredibly high stakes.
Billions on the line.
And decisions turning on tiny margins. A 50-cent difference per share could kill a deal worth billions. The pressure was immense.
And it led to some almost comical moments under stress, right? Inside the deal teams.
Absolutely. There's an anecdote about the RJR CEO, Ross Johnson, just dissolving into helpless giggles when his own banker from Shearson basically forced him to take a smaller cut, chop 2 more points off the management agreement just to keep their bid competitive. Shows the raw nerves involved.
That era also starkly revealed the sheer amount of money to be made by breaking the rules. Insider trading. Ivan Bokeski.
Buldiski was the poster child. His method was straightforward: get inside information about upcoming deals, buy up stock cheap, then cash out when the news hit. And the sums were staggering. One deal mentioned netted him $4.8 million profit.
$4.8 million on one illegal trade.
When the rewards are that high, it creates a powerful incentive for people on the inside to leak information. It almost guarantees the crime will continue.
Fast forward a bit. Corporate fraud still happens, obviously. Purdue Pharma and OxyContin is a more recent devastating example, and their legal strategy, even after pleading guilty, is telling.
It really is. Purdue pled guilty to felony misbranding, paid over $600 million in fines. Executives were fined too. Yet during sentencing, their lawyers were still arguing that the misstatements about OxyContin's risks were far from pervasive.
Trying to contain the damage, pin it on a few rogue employees.
Exactly. Blame unidentified bad actors, not systemic. Institutional deception. The goal is always damage control, protecting the core company reputation and surviving, even after admitting serious wrongdoing.
That's narrative control. But sometimes the manipulation is more direct, more systemic, aimed at rigging the game itself. The LIBOR scandal seems like a key example. Tom Hayes.
LIBOR was and still is this crucial global interest rate benchmark. It affects trillions in financial products, mortgages, loans, derivatives. And Hayes, a trader, was incredibly brazen about trying to push it around, just relentlessly emailing and messaging his contacts at other banks, telling them exactly where he needed to write. The LIBOR rate submitted higher or lower to benefit his trading positions. Explicit instructions.
And when his bosses found out about these written requests to manipulate a global benchmark, what did they do?
That's the really damning part. His manager at Citigroup, Christopher Cecere, didn't tell him to stop manipulating LIBOR. He told Hayes and his colleague to stop putting it in writing.
Use cell phones instead.
Use cell phones, which Citigroup didn't record. The message from management was clear. Keep doing it, just don't leave a trail. It points to a conscious effort, higher up, to facilitate and conceal the manipulation.
Wow. And the whole system was vulnerable because the rules were so loose.
That was the fundamental problem. There was this massive regulatory vacuum. A defense lawyer in court actually pointed out that the Chicago Mercantile Exchange itself had suggested banks could submit LIBOR rates anywhere within a feasible range without it being technically false.
A feasible range? What does that even mean?
Exactly. It was incredibly vague, arbitrary, no real external checks or verification on this critically important global number. It basically invited manipulation because the definition of cheating was so murky and enforcement was weak. So we pull all these threads together. What we're seeing is this complex architecture of modern power. It's built on, yes, technological ambition, like with AI. It's fueled by these intense corporate cultures driven by founders, but it all operates within and often exploits these fundamental mechanisms of wealth accumulation, the structural chain dynamic, the creation of dynasties, the maneuvering in protected markets, and sometimes outright financial manipulation.
They seem interconnected. The technology creates new opportunities for wealth, the founder culture drives the push to capture it, and the underlying financial structures help concentrate and protect it.
Precisely. And these forces, they drive incredible innovation, no doubt. But they also clearly generate profound inequality. And as we saw with things like Theranos or FTX or LIBOR, significant instability.
So the key takeaway for you listening to this is that understanding the big players today, the titans of the 21st century, requires looking beyond just the surface story of innovation.
Right. You have to see the combination, the intense focus, yes, but also the huge structural advantages capital provides, that urgy tailwind, and often a real willingness to push boundaries, operate in regulatory gray zones, whether that's data privacy for AI or benchmarks in finance.
And that brings us back in a way to where we started, with AI and the future of work.
It does. We talked about how venture capital, the engine of so much innovation, chases exponential returns, the kind you get from digital replication, often replacing human labor.
And how that structurally disadvantages businesses built on human care, human connection, things that scale linearly, piece by piece.
Exactly. So here's the final thought to maybe mull over. If the dominant engine of global innovation and investment is fundamentally biased against anything that can't be infinitely replicated at near zero cost, what is the long-term societal cost of systematically de-incentivizing all the businesses built on human care, connection, and physical work simply because their returns are linear, not exponential?
What happens when the system inherently values replication over perhaps necessity or humanity? That's a heavy question.
It is a real tension between the velocity the market demands and the values society might need.
Definitely something to think about as you see the next billion-dollar valuation or AI breakthrough hit the headlines. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
We'll be back soon with more insights into the architecture of modern power.